The great meeting hall on Xerion Prime buzzed with voices from 12 different worlds. Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the massive doors, feeling small next to the towering alien beings around him. His black uniform looked plain compared to the shimmering robes and crystal armor worn by the other delegates. Captain Lisa Barnes followed close behind him, carrying a data pad filled with Earth's military records. She noticed how the other species whispered and pointed at the humans with what looked like amusement in their strange eyes. At the center of the hall stood a huge table made from some kind of glowing metal. Around it sat the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. Commander Veltar of the Zephyrians looked like a tall bird covered in silver feathers. His beak clicked when he spoke, and his golden eyes never blinked. Next to him floated Prism 7, a being made entirely of living crystal that changed colors as it thought. The meeting had been called because of the Void Ravagers. These mysterious enemies had already destroyed 15 star systems along the outer edge of the galaxy. No one knew exactly what they were, but every attack left nothing behind except empty space, where planets and stars used to be. Admiral Morrison took his seat at the far end of the table. The other delegates barely looked at him as he activated his holographic display. Images of Earth's space fleet appeared in the air above the table. The ships looked old and bulky compared to the sleek vessels shown by other races. "These are our warships," Morrison said in a steady voice. "We have kept them in perfect condition and ready for combat." Commander Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. His translator device converted his clicks and whistles into words the humans could understand. "Are those museum pieces supposed to fight the Ravagers? They look like they should be in a history display." The other aliens joined in with their own versions of laughter. The insect-like hegemony chancellor rubbed his front legs together, making a buzzing sound. The elegant Ilarians covered their mouths with their long fingers, but their shoulders shook with silent giggles. Captain Barnes felt her face grow hot with anger, but Admiral Morrison put a calm hand on her arm. He had expected this reaction. Earth ships did look ancient compared to the others. The UNS Washington, Constitution, and Defiance were built with thick metal hulls and used chemical rockets for power. They had no energy shields, no space-bending drives, and no living biotechnology. Prism 7's crystal body flashed bright blue as it spoke. Its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Honored humans, perhaps your ships would be better used for carrying supplies. Combat requires more advanced technology than your species possesses." Ambassador Silandros of the Ilarians nodded gracefully. Her people looked almost human, except for their pale skin and large silver eyes. "We mean no insult, but your vessels appear to rely on primitive combustion systems. Such methods were abandoned by most civilized races thousands of years ago." Morrison stood up slowly. He was shorter than most beings in the room, but his voice carried clearly. "Our ships may look old, but they have served us well. We offer them freely to help defend against the Ravagers." The Hegemony Chancellor's compound eyes glittered as he spoke. "Your offer is noted, Admiral Morrison. However, we must consider the most effective use of all available resources." He paused, and Morrison could almost feel the dismissal coming. "We believe your fleet would serve best in a support role, perhaps guarding supply lines in the rear sectors." Captain Barnes knew what that meant. The rearguard position was where they put ships that were not expected to see any real fighting. It was a polite way of keeping the humans out of the main battle, while still letting them feel like they were helping. Commander Veltar spread his wing arms wide. "The front lines require ships that can match the Ravagers' advanced capabilities. Energy weapons, quantum shields, bioadaptive hulls. Your kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives are relics of a more primitive time." Other aliens murmured their agreement. The crystalline delegates chimed like bells, while the bioship representatives made soft organic sounds. Everyone seemed to agree that human technology was too backward for serious combat. Morrison looked around the table at faces that ranged from politely dismissive to openly mocking. He had known this would happen, but it still stung. Earth had fought hard to earn a place in the Galactic Defense Coalition, and now they were being treated like children offering to help with adult work. "Very well," Morrison said finally. "We accept the rearguard assignment. Our ships will be ready when needed." As the meeting broke up, the aliens continued their quiet conversations. Morrison's translator picked up fragments of their words. Evolutionary newcomers was one phrase he heard several times. Chemical-powered relics was another favorite. Captain Barnes walked beside him as they left the Great Hall. "Admiral, they're making a mistake. Our ships are tougher than they think." Morrison nodded but said nothing until they were alone in their transport ship. "Let them laugh, Captain. Sometimes the old ways work better than anyone expects." 3. Hours later, the human delegation was aboard their shuttle heading back to the fleet assembly point. Morrison stared out the window at the alien ships already gathering for the coming battle. They were beautiful in their own way. Some looked like living creatures swimming through space. Others appeared to be made of pure light held together by invisible forces. But Morrison remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago. His grandfather had been a soldier in Earth's last great war, before humans reached the stars. "Fancy weapons are fine," the old man had said, "but sometimes you need something that just works, no matter what." As their shuttle approached the human fleet, Morrison smiled for the first time since the meeting. The UNS Washington Constitution and Defiance might look like relics to the aliens, but they had been built by a species that understood one thing very well. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one. The Void Ravagers were coming, and soon everyone would learn what human warships could really do. 3 weeks passed like a slow countdown to war. The Kepler Junction had become the largest gathering of warships in galactic history. Hundreds of alien vessels filled the space around the ancient star, their exotic technologies creating a light show that could be seen from 3 systems away. The Zephyrian fleet hung in perfect formation, their ships looking like giant silver birds with wings spread wide. Energy fields danced between their hulls, creating patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The crystalline armada floated nearby, each vessel a work of art made from living gemstones that pulsed with inner light. Further out, the bioships of the hegemony moved like sea creatures in an invisible ocean. Their hulls breathed and flexed, covered in what looked like scales that shifted color depending on their mood. Some of the larger vessels had grown new weapons during the journey, sprouting cannon-like organs from their sides. In the middle of this impressive display, the human fleet looked like 3 gray boxes that someone had forgotten to throw away. Commander Tony Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UNS Washington, watching the alien ships through his view screen with a mixture of wonder and amusement. "They sure know how to make pretty ships," said his weapons officer, Lieutenant Bobby Chen. "Makes you wonder if they spend more time on looks than fighting." Rodriguez smiled. "Pretty ships don't win battles, Bobby. Good crews do." He turned to his communications officer. "Any word from the other human ships?" "Captain Foster on the Constitution reports all systems ready. Captain Martinez on the Defiance says his crew is getting bored waiting for something to happen." Human ships had been positioned exactly where Admiral Morrison expected, at the very back of the formation, so far from the main battle line that they would need telescopes to see the fighting. The alien commanders had made it clear that this was where the support vessels belonged. Captain Amy Foster walked the corridors of the UNS Constitution, checking on her crew. The ship had been her home for 8 years, and she knew every rivet and wire in its hull. Unlike the alien vessels with their smooth walls and glowing panels, human ships were built like machines that people could understand and fix. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Carl Murphy was running final checks on the fusion reactors. "Everything's running smooth, Captain. These old girls might not be fancy, but they'll keep running when the pretty ships break down." Lieutenant Sam Parker hurried up to Foster with a data pad in his hands. "Captain, we just received new intelligence about the enemy. Dr. Brooks wants to see you right away." Foster found Dr. Helen Brooks in the ship's small laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing energy readings and mathematical equations. Brooks was one of the few scientists who had volunteered to serve on a combat vessel, and her expertise in alien technology had already proven valuable. "Captain, I've been analyzing the Void Ravager signatures from the destroyed systems," Brooks said without looking up from her work. "What we're facing isn't what anyone thinks it is." Foster leaned over the displays, trying to make sense of the complex data. What do you mean? The Ravagers aren't ships or machines, they're something else entirely. Energy-based entities that consume matter and convert it into more of themselves. Every time they destroy something, they grow stronger. The implications hit Foster like a cold wave. The alien weapons are exactly what these things feed on, Brooks finished. Pure energy, exotic particles, quantum fields. It's like offering candy to a hungry child. The more advanced the weapon, the more nutritious it is for them. Foster stared at the data, understanding why Brooks looked so worried. Have you told Admiral Morrison about this? I sent the report an hour ago. He's keeping it classified for now. If the alien coalition learns that their weapons might actually make the enemy stronger, they could panic and scatter before the battle even starts. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the UNS Washington, Commander Rodriguez received a priority message from Admiral Morrison aboard the command ship, stationed even further back from the main fleet. The message was short but clear. Prepare for worst. Case scenario. Trust your training. Rodriguez had served under Morrison for 12 years. He knew that when the Admiral spoke in code like that, it meant trouble was coming from directions nobody expected. He called his senior officers to the bridge for a private meeting. Listen up, people. I think we're about to find out why Earth keeps building ships the old way while everyone else moved on to fancy energy weapons. Rodriguez looked at each of his officers in turn. Check all kinetic systems. Make sure every railgun, every missile, every piece of solid ammunition is ready to fire. Lieutenant Chen raised an eyebrow. Sir, against energy-based entities, shouldn't we be focusing on our plasma cannons? Maybe, maybe not. Just do as I say and trust that there's a good reason for it. As the hours passed, long-range sensors began picking up distortions in space at the edge of the system. The enemy was coming, and they were coming fast. The alien coalition's most advanced ships moved into attack formation, their weapons charging, with energies that made space itself shimmer and bend. On the bioships, living weapons began to glow with bioluminescent patterns. The crystalline vessels started singing, a sound like crystal bells that could be heard through the vacuum of space itself. The Zephyrian fleet spread their wings wider, creating energy nets between their ships. Dr. Brooks stood in her laboratory, watching the readings on her instruments climb higher and higher. The Void Ravagers were approaching faster than any of the intelligence reports had predicted. Whatever these entities were, they seemed drawn to the massive display of advanced weaponry like moths to a flame. Admiral Morrison sat alone in his command center, knowing that in a few hours, everything would change. The aliens had laughed at human ships for being primitive and outdated. Soon they would learn that sometimes primitive was exactly what the situation called for. The Void Ravagers appeared on the edge of sensor range like a dark stain spreading across the stars. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and nobody except the humans suspected how wrong everything was about to go. The Void Ravagers came out of deep space like a living nightmare. They didn't look like ships or machines at all. Instead, they appeared as dark clouds that twisted and moved in ways that made no sense. Sometimes they looked solid. Sometimes they seemed to be made of shadow and electricity. The only constant was their size. They were huge, some of them larger than entire space stations. Commander Veltar spread his silver wings wide as he stood on the bridge of his flagship. His golden eyes gleamed with confidence as he watched the enemy approach on his displays. All Zephyrian ships prepare to show these creatures the power of evolved warfare. Fire at will. The first volley from the alien coalition was magnificent to watch. Streams of pure plasma erupted from the Zephyrian ships, creating brilliant lines of light that stretched across space. The beams hit the leading Void Ravagers and seemed to tear right through them, causing parts of the dark entities to break away and dissolve. Prism 7's crystal ship added its own attack to the barrage. Focused beams of concentrated light lanced out from the living gemstone hull, each beam hot enough to cut through a planet. Where they struck the Ravagers, the darkness seemed to burn away like smoke in a strong wind. From his position far in the rear, Captain Amy Foster watched the battle through her ship's long-range sensors. The alien weapons were impressive beyond anything she had ever seen. "It looks like they're winning," said her communications officer, Danny Wright. Foster nodded, but something felt wrong to her. The Ravagers were being hit by enough firepower to destroy entire fleets, yet they kept coming forward. Keep monitoring all frequencies, Danny. Something doesn't add up. The bioships of the hegemony joined the attack next. Their living weapons launched projectiles that looked like glowing seeds. These biological weapons were designed to burrow into enemy hulls and then grow into destructive organisms. When they hit the Ravagers, they seemed to work perfectly, creating holes and tears in the dark entities. Commander Veltar broadcasted a message to the entire Coalition fleet. See how the primitive enemies fall before superior technology. This battle will be remembered as proof that evolution in warfare always triumphs over crude force. For the first hour, it looked like he was right. The alien weapons tore through the outer layers of the Ravager swarm. Smaller entities were apparently destroyed completely, breaking apart into fragments that drifted away into space. The Coalition forces pushed forward, their confidence growing with each successful hit. But Dr. Helen Brooks, watching from her laboratory on the Constitution, saw something that chilled her blood. Her instruments were picking up energy readings that made no sense. The Ravagers aren't getting smaller, she whispered to herself. They're getting bigger. She ran to the communications console and tried to contact the Coalition command ship. This is Dr. Brooks aboard the UNS Constitution. The enemy entities are not being destroyed. Repeat, they are not being destroyed. Her message was lost in the flood of victory reports coming from the alien ships. The Coalition commanders were too busy celebrating their apparent success to listen to warnings from the human rearguard. The horrible truth became clear 20 minutes later. The pieces of Ravagers that had been destroyed suddenly began moving again. But instead of reforming into their original shapes, they started flowing toward the larger entities like rivers flowing into the sea. Every energy blast that hit them, every exotic particle beam, every quantum disruption field was being absorbed and converted into more mass and power. The first sign that something was wrong came when a bioship reported that its living weapons had stopped responding. The seeds they had fired into the Ravagers were still connected to the parent ship by organic communication links. Suddenly, those links went dead, not as if they had been cut, but as if they had been eaten. Commander Veltar's confidence began to crack when his own ships reported power fluctuations. What is happening to our energy cores? He demanded. His science officer, a young Zephyrian named Keklor, stared at his instruments in horror. Sir, the enemy is somehow draining our power reserves. Every shot we fire seems to make them stronger, instead of weaker. The crystalline ships were the first to realize the full scope of the disaster. Their vessels were made of living crystal that could feel energy the way humans feel heat. Prism 7's panicked voice echoed across all communication channels. They are feeding. The entities are feeding on our attacks. All ships, cease fire. Immediately. But it was too late. The Ravagers had grown enormous from their feast of exotic energy. What had started as a swarm of maybe 50 entities had become a writhing mass of hundreds, each one larger and more powerful than before. They began to move faster, flowing through space like liquid shadow toward the alien fleet. The bioships died first. Their living hulls provided rich organic material that the Ravagers consumed eagerly. Captain Foster watched in horror as entire vessels simply vanished into the dark mass, their crew's final transmissions cut off in mid-scream. The crystalline fleet tried to retreat, but their own reflected energy weapons turned against them. The light beams they had been so proud of bounced back from the Ravagers with doubled intensity, shattering the crystal ships from within. Prism 7's final transmission was a sound like breaking glass that echoed across every radio frequency. One by one, the Coalition's most advanced ships became food for the entities they had thought they were destroying. The Zephyrian vessels, with their elegant energy wings, were consumed so completely that not even debris remained. The hegemony's bioships simply stopped moving as their living systems were overwhelmed and digested. Commander Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Washington, listening to the desperate retreat calls flooding the radio channels. "Sir," said Lieutenant Chen, "should we move forward to help?" Rodriguez looked at the tactical display, where red dots representing destroyed Allied ships were disappearing one by one. "No, Bobby. We wait for orders from Admiral Morrison." Captain Foster's voice came over the secure human channel. "This is madness. They're being slaughtered out there." Admiral Morrison's calm voice responded from the command ship. "Hold position, all human vessels. Maintain radio silence and wait for my signal." As the last of the alien coalition ships was consumed, the Void Ravagers turned their attention toward the rearguard position. They had grown fat and strong on exotic energy, and now they came looking for dessert. 3 small gray human ships waited in the darkness, apparently helpless and forgotten. The entities moved toward them like predators approaching wounded prey, expecting an easy final meal to complete their victory. The Void Ravagers moved toward the human ships like hungry wolves closing in on sheep. They had just finished feeding on the most advanced technology the galaxy could offer, and these 3 old vessels looked like easy prey. The entities flowed through space, their dark forms now twice as large as they had been at the start of the battle. Admiral Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the tactical display as the enemies approached. His hands were steady as he reached for the communication controls. Around him, his bridge crew waited in tense silence. They had watched the alien coalition die in less than 2 hours, consumed by creatures that grew stronger with every attack. "All human ships, this is Admiral Morrison," his voice carried clearly across the secure channel. "You have seen what happened to our allies. Their weapons fed these creatures exactly as Dr. Brooks predicted. Now it's our turn to show them what human warfare really means." Commander Rodriguez felt his heart rate slow down the way it always did before combat. On the bridge of the Washington, his crew moved to their battle stations with quiet efficiency. "Bobby, bring all kinetic systems online. Load the railguns with tungsten penetrators." Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew over his weapons console. "Railguns charged and ready, sir. All missile tubes loaded with conventional warheads." Captain Foster stood on the Constitution's bridge, watching the Ravagers approach through her view screen. They moved in a way that made her stomach turn, flowing like liquid darkness with sparks of stolen energy crackling through their forms. "Carl, how are our engines?" Chief Engineer Murphy's voice came through the intercom from deep in the ship. "Running hot and ready, Captain. These old chemical thrusters might not be fancy, but they'll push us anywhere you want to go." The Ravagers came within weapon range, their forms shifting and changing as they prepared to consume what they expected to be the last remnants of the galactic fleet. They had learned to feed on plasma, light beams, quantum fields, and bioenergy. What they had never encountered was something much older and simpler. Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "All ships, weapons free. Show them what humans call war." The UNS Washington fired first. Her forward railgun system engaged with a sound like thunder in a metal tunnel. A tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole launched from the ship's hull at a significant fraction of light speed. The solid metal projectile punched through the nearest Ravager like a bullet through fog. For the first time since the battle began, a Void Ravager actually took damage. The tungsten rod carried no energy for the creature to absorb, just pure kinetic force that tore a hole clean through its dark form. The entity writhed and twisted, clearly hurt by something it couldn't digest or convert. Commander Rodriguez smiled grimly as he watched the results on his tactical display. "Target the big one in the center. All railguns, continuous fire." The Washington's multiple railgun systems opened up in sequence, launching solid projectiles one after another. Each tungsten rod punched through the Ravagers without giving them anything to feed on. The creatures tried to absorb the kinetic energy, but solid matter moving at high speed was something their systems couldn't process efficiently. Captain Martinez, aboard the Defiance, joined the attack with his ship's missile systems. But these weren't the clean fusion weapons that the aliens used. Human missiles carried old-fashioned nuclear warheads, the dirty fission bombs that most civilized races had abandoned centuries ago. The nuclear explosions created chaos in space. Instead of clean energy that the Ravagers could absorb, the bombs produced electromagnetic pulses, radiation bursts, and clouds of radioactive particles. The creatures had evolved to feed on pure energy, but they had no defense against the messy, uncontrolled power of atomic weapons. Lieutenant Sam Parker coordinated targeting data from his station on the Constitution. "Captain, the nukes are disrupting their energy patterns. They can't absorb the radiation properly." Captain Foster nodded and opened fire with her ship's mass driver systems. The Constitution had been equipped with magnetic accelerators that could launch chunks of processed asteroid ore at tremendous speeds. The rocks weren't sophisticated weapons, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to hit hard. The Ravagers found themselves under attack by weapons they had no experience with, solid projectiles that couldn't be absorbed, dirty nuclear explosions that poisoned their energy-feeding systems, chunks of raw matter that overwhelmed their ability to convert mass into more of themselves. Dr. Brooks watched from her laboratory as her instruments showed the Ravagers' energy signatures becoming unstable. "It's working. They're trying to process the kinetic energy, but they can't do it fast enough. The solid matter is causing them to fragment." The human ships moved through space with an agility that surprised the Ravagers, while the alien vessels had relied on exotic propulsion systems that could be disrupted. Human ships used simple chemical thrusters and reaction mass. Even in the electromagnetic chaos of the battle zone, they maintained perfect control. Commander Rodriguez coordinated with the other human captains as they executed a maneuver that would have been impossible for energy-dependent ships. "Form up in attack formation Delta. We're going to hit them from 3 directions at once." The 3 human ships spread out in a triangle, using their conventional engines to position themselves around the largest group of Ravagers. The creatures tried to follow their movements, but they had been designed to fight enemies that stayed in one place and traded energy beams. Human ships that darted around like angry wasps were something entirely new. Captain Martinez activated his ship's secret weapon. The Defiance had been equipped with a mass driver system that could launch literal chunks of asteroid material. When the rocky projectiles hit the Ravagers, the creatures tried to absorb them like they had absorbed everything else. But raw stone and metal weren't energy they could easily convert, and the effort destabilized their entire structure. The tide of battle began to turn as the human fleet proved that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most effective ones. The Ravagers, so confident after consuming the advanced alien fleet, found themselves facing weapons that worked on principles their systems simply couldn't handle. For the first time since they had begun their campaign of destruction, the Void Ravagers were losing a battle. The final phase of the battle began when Admiral Morrison gave the order that would end the Void Ravager threat forever. The 3 human ships had proven that kinetic weapons could hurt the entities, but now it was time to finish what they had started. "All ships implement Pattern Omega," Morrison's voice carried across the communication channels. "Dr. Brooks, activate the coordination system." Dr. Helen Brooks had spent the last 20 minutes of the battle working on calculations that would have made alien scientists proud. But instead of exotic mathematics about energy fields and quantum mechanics, she was working with simple physics. Mass times velocity equals force. It was math that any human child could understand, but applied on a scale that could crack planets. The 3 human ships moved into a perfect triangle formation around the largest remaining group of Ravagers. The creatures had learned to fear human weapons, but they still didn't understand what was about to happen to them. Commander Rodriguez checked his weapons display one final time. "All railgun systems charged and synchronized. Bobby, you ready for the biggest fireworks show in galactic history?" Lieutenant Chen nodded, his hands steady on the firing controls. "Ready when you are, sir. Target locked and tracking. Captain." Foster positioned the Constitution at the apex of the triangle, her ship's mass drivers loaded with the heaviest projectiles they could carry. "Carl, I need everything the engines can give us. We're going to have to move fast after this." "Chief," Engineer Murphy's voice came back strong and confident. "She's ready, Captain. These old girls can dance when they need to." The Ravagers sensed something different about the human formation, but they couldn't understand what. They had fed on energy-based weapons for so long that they had forgotten how to defend against simple physical attacks. Now they were about to learn why human military doctrine had never abandoned kinetic weapons. Dr. Brooks activated the targeting computer that linked all 3 ships together. It wasn't advanced alien technology, It was just a simple system that could calculate where 3 moving objects needed to aim, so their projectiles would all arrive at the same place at the same time. Coordination system active, Brooks reported. All ships have firing solutions, Admiral, we're ready. Admiral Morrison took a deep breath. In the next few minutes, they would either save the galaxy or become another meal for the Ravagers. All ships, fire when ready. Let's end this. The coordinated attack began with the Washington launching a full spread of tungsten rods from every railgun she had. The metal projectiles streaked through space in perfect formation, each one aimed at a different part of the largest Ravager entity. A split second later, the Constitution fired her mass drivers. Chunks of processed asteroid or the size of houses launched from her hull, following trajectories that would bring them into the same target area as the tungsten rods. The Defiance completed the attack pattern by launching every nuclear missile she carried. The warheads were set to detonate in a precise sequence, creating overlapping fields of radiation and electromagnetic interference. The Ravagers tried to move away from the incoming barrage, but they had made a critical mistake. They had clustered, together to share the energy they had absorbed from the alien fleet. Now that clustering made them a perfect target for weapons that worked by hitting things really hard. The first tungsten rods arrived and punched through the creatures like bullets. Through paper, the Ravagers writhed in pain, trying to absorb the kinetic energy, but there was too much of it coming too fast. Before they could process one impact, 3 more rods hit them from different angles. The asteroid chunks arrived next, slamming into the damaged entities with enough force to shatter moons. The Ravagers tried desperately to convert the raw matter into energy they could use, but the effort overwhelmed their systems. Cracks appeared in their dark forms as they struggled to digest material that was simply too crude for their refined feeding mechanisms. The nuclear warheads detonated in the middle of the chaos, adding clouds of radioactive particles and electromagnetic static to the mix. The dirty explosions poisoned the space around the Ravagers, making it impossible for them to feed properly on any energy in the area. Captain Foster watched through her view screen as the largest Ravager entity began to break apart. It's working. They can't handle multiple types of kinetic attack at the same time. Lieutenant Parker coordinated the final strike from his position on the Constitution. All ships, the big one is fragmenting. Concentrate fire on the pieces before they can escape. The human ships executed a hunting pattern that their crews had practiced for years. While alien fleets relied on complex formation flying and energy coordination, human tactics were based on simple principles. Surround the enemy, hit them from multiple directions, don't give them time to recover. Commander Rodriguez brought the Washington around for another attack run. Keep those railguns firing. Don't give them a second to rest. The remaining Ravagers tried to flee, but human ships were faster and more maneuverable than they had expected. Captain Martinez chased down the smaller entities with the Defiance, using conventional missiles to herd them back toward the main battle area. Dr. Brooks monitored the enemy energy signatures as they continued to weaken. Admiral, their core structures are becoming unstable. I think we can finish them with one more coordinated strike. Admiral Morrison made the final decision of the battle. All ships implement final attack pattern, target the largest fragments, and don't stop firing until there's nothing left. The last phase of the attack was almost anticlimactic. The Ravagers, so powerful when feeding on exotic alien technology, simply fell apart under the sustained barrage of human kinetic weapons. There were no dramatic explosions or cosmic light shows. The entities just broke into smaller and smaller pieces until they were too small to maintain their structure. When the firing finally stopped, the space around Kepler Junction was filled with debris from both the alien fleet and the Ravagers. But the human ships still floated intact, their hulls scarred but unbroken. The few surviving alien ships that had escaped the initial massacre slowly approached the human fleet. Their crews could hardly believe what they had witnessed. The primitive ships they had laughed at had just accomplished what the most advanced technology in the galaxy could not. Commander Veltar's damaged ship limped toward the Washington, his voice humble for the first time since the humans had met him. Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Defense Coalition formally requests that human ships lead all future defensive operations against unknown threats. Admiral Morrison smiled as he looked out at his 3 battered but victorious ships. Next time, Commander Veltar, don't laugh at the old ways until you understand why they survived. The battle was over, and humanity had proven that sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one.